Welcome to another episode of Banking Transformed, the podcast that dives deep into the trends, innovations, and strategies shaping the future of banking. I'm your host, Jim Marous, owner and CEO of the Digital Banking Report and co-publisher of the Financial Brand. By enabling secure data sharing between financial institutions, fintechs, and third-party providers, open banking can foster innovation, enhance competition, and ultimately deliver better financial products at the right time to consumers. With open banking, consumers will be able to access personalized services, compare offerings from different providers, and make more informed decisions. In this episode of Banking Transform, we have Deep Varma, the CTO at Alkami, and he explores the technological challenges, regulatory developments, and strategies for success in the new era of financial services. Deep also discusses how organizations of all sizes can be positioned to embrace the open banking revolution, leading to more consumer-centric, efficient, and embedded financial services. To prepare for open banking, financial institutions must develop a clear API strategy that aligns with overall business goals. Fostering a culture of innovation and collaboration with fintechs and third-party providers will be essential to enhance open banking offerings and provide complementary services that can provide differentiation in a crowded marketplace. Finally, institutions must educate and engage consumers about the benefits of open banking, addressing their concerns around data strategy and privacy. So Deep, we met a little over a year ago at Alkami Collab, just after you joined the company. We also saw each other a few months ago at your Collab event this year. Could you provide a little bit of a summary about your really interesting background and career path and your role at Alkami?
Sure. So look, first and foremost, it's always a pleasure to be with Jim because I enjoy our conversations. That's always the fun. So a little bit about myself. I'm a technologist. I am here to use the technology to solve the problems for the businesses and ultimately for the consumers. And I'm based here in Silicon Valley. I've been here in Silicon Valley for over 25 years, and I joined Alkami last year, January, as a chief technology officer to ensure that our banking platform is aligned with where the industry is going and bring more innovation, and open banking is part of that strategy too. So that's the role I play here at Alkami.
So before we dive in, because the banking industry has a tendency, myself included, to either oversimplify or overcomplicate definitions. So from your perspective, what is open banking and why is it crucial to understand and integrate with an open banking platform for the future?
Yeah. So Jim, I come from a very consumer-driven mindset. So I'm going to speak a consumer language to make it simple. What is open banking? As a consumer, so open banking empowers a consumer to decide who to share the data with, and also to decide that I, as a consumer, gets the benefit of that data. So that's the way I look into it from a consumer point of view, that I am empowered to decide, share this data with this fintech or with this fintech based on the value coming back to me. That's the way I look into it for businesses and for the financial institutions. For financial institutions, having a platform which provides an API access to the fintechs so that fintechs can seamlessly and easily consume this data to provide the value back to the consumers. But at the end, consumers are those who are going to win with this open banking.
Well, you know, when you look at financial institutions, there's been a lot of activity in the open banking area. Many financial institutions really don't understand how to get engaged with open banking platform and allow those opportunities. But just as importantly, as soon as some organizations get involved and start going down the path, regulations come into play, and regulators are, in my opinion, somewhat playing catch up with regard to a lot of our regulatory and compliance issues. In fact, the UK was several years ahead of the US with regard to their open banking regulations. So overall, what have the U.S. regulators, how have they influenced the development of U.S. open banking? And what further actions do you anticipate that could either constrict or expand the opportunity for financial institutions, really of all sizes?
Frankly speaking, I've been waiting for years for this open banking finally come to US. When you look around, we are lagging behind in this open banking. UK, Asian countries, and very African countries, they're way ahead in this game as compared to the US. I think when I was at Varo Bank before joining Alkami, I've been working very closely with the regulators. I think there is enough pressure has been built on top of the regulators from the consumers on opening up the banking platform, where regulators finally came and said, if we don't do this, we won't stay as an innovative in this industry, and especially in the US. So that's what I see. So I think this is, to me, is the step number one in the open banking, where we are saying, consumers, you have a right to decide who to share the data, when to share it, and how to get the value. But what I see where we are going to go, where now regulators are going to come and say how this data portability is also working. So what I am expecting to see, Deep tomorrow decides, I don't want to work with this financial institution. Jim, today, if I have to go to a different financial institution, I lose all my data from this financial institution. I have my bill payment set up. I have my recurring payment set up. I have to rebuild everything from the scratch. So I expect the data portability is going to come into a picture, as I can go and change my AT&T career to the Verizon and still keep the same number. I expect this is the next phase which is going to happen. And I expect there is some regulations around the risk and the security associated to it going to come more and more. How do we ensure that this data remains safe and secure in some kind of a vault? That's the second area which I expect we will see the regulation. And then the third place, which is mostly the industry has to do a better job, is looking into the financial inclusion, the financial literacy.
Yes. Yep.
Those are the areas where I see more and more momentum building up. Jim, there are many people, millions of people, those who have no idea what they can do with this data to improve their life conditions. So that's what I see, those three areas, which is we are going to go more deeper in coming years.
Well, there's obviously significant regulation coming on board with the CFPB open banking rule. What does that entail? And how does that, again, getting back to where we've been versus where we're going, how does this really help financial institutions prepare for the future of more of an open banking and embedded banking in universe?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, financial institutions needs to consider open banking not as a burden, but more as a part of an obligation to serve their consumers. Because when I talk to certain financial institutions, they think, oh my God, we have another burden coming on our way. I won't consider a burden. I will say, this is how you serve your customer. What they need to do is, one, they need to ensure they have the infrastructure to support this new regulation, that they can allow the fintechs to come and access the data. The second thing is, they need to also use the open banking to see how to improve their own business processes, how to improve the customer experience. There are times, the customers are leaving financial institutions because you're not providing them the right services or you're not providing them the tools. So I will say technology will play a role in ensuring you have an infrastructure to scale, but then financial institutions also needs to look into their internal business processes and the tools also inside to see are they ready to serve the consumers for the open banking or not. So those are the two areas where they need to focus on.
It's interesting. In the banking industry today, compared to what it was 4 years ago, 5 years ago, the collaboration with third-party providers such as Alkami and many others that really are providing the education, the tools, the expertise, the personnel in many cases to become future ready and resilient going forward. I mean, these are powerful tools for these collaborations. What is Alkami doing today to help your, what I'm going to call mid-level financial institutions, even smaller financial institutions, prepare for and build for the future of opening banking environment?
Yeah. So number one, we are definitely investing in scaling our infrastructure, because what's going to happen is with the amount of the network what we have, soon we are going to see more consumers are going to come and say, I want my data to be shared with fintech 1, fintech 2, fintech 3, and you cannot continue to scale with the screen scraping techniques, because scraping techniques are very dangerous. It's
Yeah,
very dangerous.
right.
So it means invest in the open APIs, the standard APIs, where you enable consumers to come to the financial institutions app and give a permission. And then our platform needs to be resilient enough and the scalable enough that it can auto scale when the traffic is coming in. And the second piece is, as we allow the infrastructure to scale for the financial institutions, because that's the reason they come to us. They come to us, hey, we don't have that technology and the infrastructure, you lean on us. So invest in APIs, invest in infrastructure. But the second piece, which is also important with the open banking, as the fintechs and the third parties, they take the data, they drive the value out of that data. How do we bring that value back to our platform to give it back to the consumer? Because the mobile banking is the way for them to engage. And it is very tough for the consumers to have 20, 30 mobile apps on their device to go to the different places and look into the data. So what I call this as a super app concept, right? So this is where
Yep.
I log into my financial institution's mobile app. I know where my data has been shared, and I can have a one centralized place where I can see the value of that data. So that's what Alchemy Jim is focused on today, scaling the infrastructure, scaling the APIs, and bringing the data back to the consumers from the third parties so that they can make the right decisions for themselves.
It's interesting. Open banking involves multiple components of how banking interacts with the consumer, as you mentioned. We have the situation where, in my case, I end up opening multiple financial institution relationships, both my primary financial institution and elsewhere, and they don't always talk with each other very well. Open banking can help address that. In the same sense, I want to have a way to roll up all my information so I can see my financial profile in one place, in one area, and really make it so that I have a partner that can help me along my financial wellness journey. When you work with mid-sized financial institutions today, what are the major technology challenges that most of these organizations face when trying to prepare for an environment where they can become the real final partner for the consumer?
Yeah. I think what I have seen one of the challenges not around the technology, but the challenge is mostly around how open banking is going to impact me as a financial institution. And the second is what I'm supposed to do with it, right? So those are the two areas they are struggling. And I think from a technology point of view, while platform like Alkami will help them from enabling the consumers to decide who to share with, I think their internal technologies are very, at this time, are heterogeneous, where their internal tools are not connected with each other and they don't talk with each other. The risk system,
Yep.
the security
I
system.
mean, honestly, the product system too, because you have
Yeah,
product silos that make it so my loan relationship doesn't talk to my deposit relationship, things of that nature.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So your account opening, your risk and fraud systems, everything is disjointed today. I think to serve the consumer with the open banking, you need to start thinking from a consumer 360 as a centralized point of view to solve that problem. So that's what I think the biggest challenge, what I expect financial institutions to face is, do I have internally the end to end one centralized view of a consumer?
So we work together, our organizations work together. I did a research report on Alkami's behalf for your digital maturity index that organizations can actually use a tool to rate themselves to find out where are they along that digital maturity curve. We looked at the more tactical issues such as personalization, the ability to seamlessly open a new account, the ability to do so in the lending side as well, the use of data and AI and that analytics to actually know your customer, all these elements. But when you think about it, all those really roll up to an open banking infrastructure that allows this to happen. So really, this is a bigger piece of the overall data maturity model and being able to look and saying, are you going to be resilient in the future? Can you pivot if the marketplace pivots? With this, it's hard for many organizations to totally understand the ramifications, but from a product perspective, your organization also partners with a lot of organizations, fintech providers that provide tools, everything from Savvy Money to a lot of other companies that you integrate those. How do you work with smaller and mid-sized financial institutions to get them prepared for what is coming down the road and what is really the underbelly of all the elements of data, digital market maturity that we talk about in your research?
Jim, if you remember during this collab, I talked about the transformation arc. It started with the digital twin, user experience, and now we are entering into the data maturity curve, where the data is going to
Yeah.
become so paramount. And the data is not just the rows and the columns. The data is what are the insights I can drive, and then what is the actionable insights I can take. So, for example, hey, Deep, you have been spending this much money on your lending, like on your mortgage. Do you know that you can go to this financial institution and you can get the lower rate? So, insights is one thing, actionable is the second thing. The role what Alchemy plays, number one, is helping financial institutions to understand, do you have the right data strategy? I think having the data strategy is one piece, but do you have the people who understands the data strategy? Because sometimes what happens is financial institutions goes and hire a consulting firms to define the data strategy, but if you don't have your own data people to drive your strategy, that's the second
Right.
stumbling block. And the third area is, do you have a partner or do you have the right data infrastructure in place? For example, are you going to get the data in a batch file? Are you going to get the data in a streaming way? Are you going to get the data in an API way? So I think those are the areas where Alchemy is getting into. How do we take the data and give it to our financial institutions so that they can take the advantage of it and help them? So those are the areas what Alchemy is focused on. Your data strategy, do you have the data infrastructure? Do you have the people to understand the data?
Interesting. You brought up very well in that building partnerships with third-party providers that work beside you to actually help you become more resilient, more future-ready going forward is asking the questions. It's interesting because in working with your team in the past and other teams, I realized that, yes, you bring solutions to the marketplace, but because of all your relationships in the marketplace with other financial institutions, you're able to ask the right questions to get them along that continuum of data maturity and digital maturity to really make them more prepared for the future. As you do that, obviously, there's ways that this improves the customer experience and improves the differentiation potential. How does open banking really do that? How does it improve the customer experience? How does it make it so that if I'm working with a company that is really along the path of digital market maturity with regard to open banking, how does that impact the consumer directly?
Yeah. And this is where it gets interesting. It's customer experience. I think there are times I have heard people getting a little confused between the user experience and the customer experience. So I want to clarify user experience when you engage with the product and the application and the tool, how easy it is for you to navigate through that. That's a user experience. Customer experience is my experience working with you as a financial institution. Are you providing me the right services at the right time? So when I go into the branches, when I enter, someone comes and say, hello, welcome, Mr. Varma. That is the customer experience. When I go to the teller is just not the transactional relationship. It is an emotional relationship. Hello, Mr. Verma, you have $20,000 in this account. If you move into the savings account, you're going to get this much interest better, right? Open banking is going to help financial institutions to take all the data and give consumers what they want at the right time. Yeah. And I think that to me is a changing movement because consumers are hungry at this time. They are hungry to say, help me, but industry is not helping them. So it is what I will say, the example which I just gave it to you. How do you bridge the gap between online and offline? Because the customer experience is going to be when I go to a branch and when I go to a digital channel, my experience has to be seamless. It is like Jim watching a Netflix show. It doesn't matter you are at home, you are on a plane, you are in a hotel. Your customer experience with the Netflix is same irrespective of where you are. So Jim, that's what I think open banking is going to enable to change how the experiences have been given from the physical experiences to the digital experiences to serve consumers what they want at the right time.
So what's the risk of an organization not building for an open banking future? What is the risk? The do nothing is always an option. It is an option that many financial institutions take on an array of things that I believe they need to do, which is nice because it keeps both of us in business. But that being said, what is the risk of an organization not preparing for open banking?
I think we always have a choices as an organizations to do something or not to do something. And as I said in the beginning, there are some organizations when I interact with them, they still consider open banking as a burden. But let me tell this, what I call as an organic death. That's what's going to happen. If you don't do anything, shift is already happening. Look around the world. The shift is already happening. What's going to happen slowly and gradually, your members, your users, your consumers, they're going to start leaving you. And what's going to happen when that's going to start, your business is going to die by itself. So it is not a choice at this moment of time, frankly speaking. I think you need to better align with this because it is how the shift is happening. So I call Jim, in my terminology, as an organic death, which is going to happen to the businesses, those who are not getting ready for the open banking. That's the way to look into it.
So, one of the things on the opposite side of the potential of open banking is the whole risk issue or the perceived risk issue of consumer data being secure and privacy being protected. How do financial institutions ensure that they are not going down a path of risk expansion? And how does Alkami help their financial institutions keep consumers' data secure and privacy protected?
And this is a very big risk, Jim, when you look into from the data point of view. If Deep has 10 different accounts and Deep wants to look into, Credit Karma, Savvy Money, and so many other things, now Deep is opening up the risk so that my data is going to all the third parties. The data breaches are common in the industry. Number one, we just need to ensure that the companies which we are partnering up with have the PCI compliance in place. They have a very strong, strict security guidelines. We need to ensure that their data is guarded when it is networking on the networking layer. When we are communicating, it is always the secure protocol. So I will say while the risk is increasing, is picking up the third parties in our ecosystem, selecting the third parties, looking into their PCI compliance, looking into their how do they store the data at rest, or how do they have the data at when it is on the move, what technologies they are using, and continuously doing a regular audits of the systems. Those are the areas what we need to be doing more work. Otherwise, the probability of the data leaking through the pipes is going to increase. So that's what we need to do.
It's interesting. It gets back to many organizations are somewhat unprepared for moving forward for what needs to be done in banking. And this is where the collaboration with third-party institutions such as Alkami is so important because, again, they can build from the success stories that you've had. They can build from the challenges you've seen organizations have. Even though every organization says we're different than everybody else, the reality is there's so many similarities that 80% of what they do, others have done it before them. And the ability for your team to come in, ask the questions that needs to be asked to find out, is there risk out there, provides a tremendous advantage and actually an open book for insight within an organization to say, at least I know I'm going down the path that others have gone down and I have less risk involved there. So speaking of success stories, can you share some success stories or case studies of financial institutions that have actually successfully implemented some open banking strategies?
Yeah. So we have many financial institutions who have partnered up with us to use, for example, Plaid to connect with other financial institutions. And we have built, our APIs based on the industry specifications. When they go through the Plaid, they can connect other financial institutions to Alkami, but they can also connect Alkami's platform to the third parties also. So using like Plaid is one of the success stories, partnering with them, how we enable the financial institutions to use this open banking rails to get the data go back and forth to enable the businesses. And I think this is paying off when we look into what we call as an account aggregation. Account aggregation is one of the areas. I have my accounts in 3 different places. I get one view, and then that one view can tell me how I'm spending my money. When do I need more money to support this? So I will say that using this Plaid relationship is definitely played off for many financial institutions in our network. those who are using this as one of the successes for the open banking.
Yeah, and it's important because that opens the door to the other partners that you've vetted and you provide tools for financial institutions to use. I get very frustrated because I work with two very, very large top 10 financial institutions. And because one of them does not really embrace Plaid for their own reasons, it makes it so that I can't get the flow of funds, the insight, the view of my overall relationship in an easy way. I have to cobble it together myself. Yeah. And I'm still writing checks on twice a month basis to deposit from my business account to my personal account because there's no seamless and easy way for these organizations to talk to each other still today. What advice do you give financial institutions that are just starting this open banking journey? Where should they start besides giving your team a call? But where else should they start to really get going on this journey?
I think what they start. I think the best and the most important thing is reach out to your members and the consumers, and you will see the pain point. Jim, you just gave your example. By you not having this seamless integrations, the work which adds to you. And the good news is you are not alone. People like you and me are on the same boat because I do that. I think what they need to do is they really need to look into internally and say, do I have someone in my organization who is strategically thinking about the open banking? That's the number one. If you're going to have open banking distributed to the 10 people in your organization, it means no one is focused on the open banking. So have someone who is looking into open banking. Marry the open banking with your data strategy. Don't keep them independent because they are related. So open banking with the data strategy. Second piece is look into your risk and the compliance area. Are you ready? Do you have the right controls in place with the risk and the compliance area? If you have an InfoSec organization, is your InfoSec organization is also ready for the data exchanges, how you're going to respond in the case of the data breaches? So there are multiple areas, but what I will say, the first thing what they can do is have someone internally whose full-time job is to look into open banking and the data, which is going to impact them in coming years to come.
You know, it's interesting. I sometimes construct these questions ahead of time, and then when I read them or I look at them, they're in my mind. I'm saying that's not a good question. And one I was going to ask you was, how do you see the open banking landscape evolve in the next 5 to 10 years? And immediately I go, where in the world did I get 5 to 10 years? Because we see so much change happening in the first 1 to 3 years that gives us a good guidepost. To know what's going to happen in 5 to 10 years is really a tough one. But with that in mind, if you look at an extraordinarily pure, great open banking environment with multiple financial institutions, but your own in particular, what will banking look like in the next 1 to 3 years, or in a really good environment where open banking is key and foundational to the organization?
Yeah.
How would that feel from a consumer's perspective compared to the way it feels today?
Yeah. First and foremost, we all know, Jim, this device is not going anywhere. Wherever I'm going to go, some manifestation of a mobile device is always going to be with me.
Yeah.
So the way I look into the open banking, the consumer, my data is in my phone. It is in my vault. If I go to a different financial institution, I can tap my phone and I can exchange the data with them. That's the way I look into it, that I'm in the control. I don't need to go and set up the system. I carry this device. I'm sitting with my financial advisor. Hey, Deep, I want your statements. I just use this device. My data get transferred into a different system in a seamless way. That's one. Number two, I look into when I log into the mobile app, I'm not starting my relationship just looking into what is my balance. I call this as a transitional relationship. I want to see looking more into an emotional relationship. Hey, Deep, you can now go and lend money from this financial institution, which will reduce your rate by 2%. So when I log into the app, don't just show me the balance, show me how you're helping me. That's the second area which I'm going to see the shift happening. And the third area which I see with the open banking shift happening is more and more service providers and more insights coming into the system. When I'm at the Starbucks, I can directly pay the payments from my financial institutions by tapping. This whole payment system, I see the changes happening in the payment industry with the open banking, how the money gets moved. So I see this three areas which is definitely going to keep evolving, but at the same time, we should not forget about the risk and the security. From the consumer point of view, they don't think about it on a day-to-day basis, but it is our job to make sure that while we provide the best experiences, we should not compromise on the risks and the security associated with the open banking.
Boy, that brings it all together really well, because I think when we talk about customer experience, we talk about personalization, we talk about ease and simplicity, we talk about empathy, but all that goes out the window if we don't take care of the data security and the privacy issues. And I get dazzled by the shining stars out there, what can happen, but we have to remember that it all blows up, for lack of a better term, if we don't keep our risk and privacy issues in alignment. And, it's exciting, Deep. I always enjoy talking to you and talking often about the future, but everything, as you said, is driven by building for an open banking future. We look at the amount that's going to happen with generative AI, and the more data we take in, the better we're going to be able to implement against this model, this platform. When you look at the new products that are coming into the foray, and while organizations are improving their ability to do the tactical things with your phone, the reality is, I had a gentleman at the Financial Brand Forum that I interviewed that said, it's about making it all DIY. The consumer's got to be able to very easily do it themselves. And it may be without any device at all. It may be out of the air. And the future of where banking is going, we're all playing catch up, but it's important for us to catch up in the open banking area, because whatever takes place in the future, whatever compliance or regulations come into the foray, this foundation is going to be key. And I think the one thing that we touched upon, but not probably deep enough, is the fact that there's no size organization that can't do this. I think that's what's really exciting is this is not just for the big boys. I mean, in fact, I would hazard a guess, and we have a podcast with you on Visionaries Podcast, that we talk to people regularly that say some of the smallest organizations are doing the most exciting things in the open banking area. So, Deep, it's always great to talk to you. I really appreciate your time and your sharing your insights into what's going on with open banking, and also the commitment Alkami is making to building an open banking ecosystem that's going to be forward looking for your partner organizations. So thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And I always enjoy talking with you. You inspire me a lot too, because you are doing such a big thing for this industry, helping us navigate in the next era. So I appreciate you, Jim, too.
I appreciate that. And if anybody isn't seen Deep dance, when he's about to get on stage and do a presentation, he will dance on stage. The guy does not lack enthusiasm, and he keeps that dancing going into the wee hours of the night. Just saying. He does better than I do on that one. So we won't share any of that in our podcast, but I will say that your enthusiasm inspires me as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks for listening to Banking Transformed, the top podcast in retail banking and the winner of 3 international awards for podcast excellence. We appreciate the support you've been providing. If you enjoy what we're doing, please take some time to show some love in the form of a review. On that note, thanks to Carla from California for the recent review. She wrote, excellent and insightful interview format covering current topics in banking and fintech. Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss the next great opportunity that can lead to greater growth and loyalty. This has been a production of Evergreen Podcast. A special thank you to our senior producer, Leah Hassage, audio engineer, Chris Fafalius, and video producer, Will Pritz.